Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
that Matt kid.
And Steve.
And Steve. This is the final episode for the year of Geeky Gentleman History Month, the month in which we discuss the contributions that gentlemen have made to history, but that have been ignored by a biased educational system, except not at all. And it's been a fucking saga to get to this episode of people coming and going and dropping it in and dropping it out. So, at long last, we're here to discuss Matt's movie pick, which was called what, sir?
It is called... It has been a minute. It is called The Whole Wide World. It is a biopic from 1996 about Robert E. Howard, pulp writer from the 1930s, creator of such notable characters as Conan the Barbarian. It was starring Vincent D'Onofrio and Renee Zellweger, and directed by Dan Ireland, who I've never fucking heard of. And honestly, that seems kind of fitting because I feel like most people don't even know that this movie exists. I mean, I've been aware of it for a long time, and I only just now watched it this weekend.
I mean, is this rude to say? Because this is, based off of her memoirs and stuff.
Yes.
But is it rude to just come out and say, yeah, because it's not a very, engaging movie, given that, literally almost nothing happens?
No, that's totally fair, because it's fucking Robert E. Howard kind of had this on again, off again with this Novelyn Price, and then she's like, all right, years later when she's in her 70s, she's gonna write her memoirs, and then that gets turned into a movie. And it turns out her memoirs are just like, yeah, I knew this guy, he was kind of shitty sometimes, and we just talked. That's it. That's the whole fucking movie. It's
yeah, that was kind of the thing of it's, they're engaging conversations. I'll not gonna hold it against the movie itself, because I feel like the actors and the way it's shot does as much as you can with the material, but it's just it's just not a very cinematic kind of fucking story to adapt to film, It's literally, they just talk a bunch and go on long walks in the Texas wilderness that I've been to Texas a couple times. I'm gonna throw a hot take out here that I have absolutely done no research on and cannot back up whatsoever. I don't think any of this movie was shot in Texas. I don't think there's that much green in the entire state of Texas.
You know what?
Shot in the dark, but that was just a literally. I looked at Haley as we were watching it. It was when they're in the big river, the first time that they kiss and stuff, and I'm like, I don't think there's that much green in Texas. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. that set me for a minute.
That's so good. Yeah, I mean that's kind of I don't know. I guess that's the problem, if you want to call it that, of being set within the last handful of years of Robert E. Howard's life, because he's got this whole fascinating childhood being influenced by the Texas oil boom, and you could talk about that and you could show his whole life story, which would probably make for a more, but by the time this movie starts, he's already known, he's already submitted tons of work to Weird Tales, and so I'm just it's really just a love story, because that's the only portion of his life that we really care about other than his death. and the love story is just not super engaging.
I mean,
Yeah.
I will say though, I think Renee Zellweger and Vincent D'Onofrio have really good chemistry with each other. So when they're early on getting to know each other and falling in love, I do think that stuff is really engaging. The problem is just like historically and in the movie, Novelin's not really in any of the thick of the stuff about Howard that's interesting. She's purely on the outside looking in. So even the stuff that was going on in like between 33 to 36 when he died, the stuff about like weird tales not being completely financially solvent and them being behind on payments to their creators and the stuff going in and out with between him and other people in the bullpen of Weird Tales that was compounding with his mother's health. Like, she's not privy to any of that. So the movie can't focus on any of it. So instead, it just kind of makes her this figure that's always looking at him from a distance. And sometimes that paints a really unsympathetic picture of him and has the added effect of making her look really boring and unsympathetic.
Yeah, because that was the thing as I was watching this, because I've not read any of the original Conan stuff. I think the only Conan I've read, actually read on his own was, I watched the movie for when Steve was trying to convince me that films don't suck. And I read when Conan showed up in the Dark Avengers book while he was in the Marvel Universe for a hot minute.
The
I don't know
first
if he
time.
still is or what?
The first time. Because there was a second time where we did that.
Oh, where you tried to convince me that film doesn't
No.
suck?
Where Conan shows up in the Marvel universe. Because you read the first time of the first line of Savage Avengers. Then years later, they did Savage Avengers again, and it was the same thing.
Oh, that's funny.
I think that was the one where Conan in modern day New York goes into a club, and it's this rave club, and it's the cult of Set, and they're all like in rave gear, and he's like taking a sword to all these people in this like druggy cult thing in modern day New York, and I was like, this is actually kind of cool.
Yeah. So I've not read a ton up on any of this Conan stuff, and so it just made it kind of hard to really understand or get a good sense of the guy outside of what's shown in the movie. And what's shown in the movie is just the most like that scene where he comes out of the store wearing the sombrero and he's got the giant fake mustache on that's supposed to be a real giant mustache. Just made me go this is the most fucking anime weeboo shit running around Naruto style in public kind of vibe I've ever seen. It just made him so unlikable so quickly. Which I understand was the point, but man, just him outside on the road in the fucking sombrero, just pacing out of her window. He's pissed off about something. I'm like, man, you need to go take care of your own self a little bit here.
Yeah, it's funny too, because obviously I am a pretty big Conan fan. I've read all of Robert E. Howard's Conan stuff. I've read fuck all of his other stuff because I just don't care that much. But I've never been super fascinated by the man's actual real life. I probably know more about it than the average person. But if you try to watch this to really understand him as a person, I mean, Steve's right. You kind of just get that outside looking in perspective, and they'll pay lip service to things. H.P. Lovecraft gets mentioned like it's a cameo in a fucking Marvel movie, but we don't really get any sense of what the relationship is there or how that affects his writing. I mean, God, he's got a character named Agnes de Castellon who is arguably based off Novelin Price, but we don't get into anything that's not just surface level. Yeah, you guys know who Conan is, and that's the only part of his work that we're really going to talk about, other when he briefly talks about writing erotica, which he talks about real briefly. But he's always an arm's length away, and I get that we're seeing this through Novelin as our like point of view character, but it just leads to a character study of Robert E. Howard that just feels kind of incomplete because I feel like I'm not ever really fully understanding where he is, other than just grappling with maybe depression, maybe all of these things, but it doesn't feel like it ever really commits a lot of time to that.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I like this movie a little bit more than both of you guys did, just from the way this is sounding. But that was my big problem with the whole movie by the end, which is because we're always on the outside looking in, we end up with a portrait of Robert E. Howard that's not only not complete, but is also not super nuanced or sympathetic. And consequently, it makes Novelin seem like she's not super sympathetic. There's that scene towards the end before he dies, like the last big blowout between the two of them, where he gives her a call and wants to pick her up that night to go for a show or whatever. And at that point, his mom has an episode, and we spend a good amount of time watching him take care of her. And then immediately hard cut to him arguing with Novelin at her door in the middle of the night. And the way the movie treats him, it's like he's this mentally ill man-child who can't sort of comprehend anything about adulthood that isn't just filtered through Conan. And when she gives him that big blow up in his face where she's like, why don't you just hire somebody? It feels like the movie's not really aware that he spent all this time being really sympathetic to this daughter, or this mother-son relationship, and her just saying that makes her look kind of bad. And the movie just doesn't care about that. So you're left with this weird taste in your mouth for both the characters, where you're like, I don't know if I really like Robert E. Howard from anything from anything that Novelin said, but I also just don't like Novelin very much by the end either. So what am I rooting for?
Yeah, I can see that to an extent. It's weird because I didn't like hate this movie watching it. This wasn't like one of those movies where I started like, all right, time to look at the phone, or just this turned into a real chore. But at the same time, I just, got to the end of it. I'm like, oh wait, so that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get the she's at like the Louisiana address, and she gets the letter, and it's like, he's killed himself. I'm like, oh shit, okay. Like, it almost like didn't feel like, I guess that's like to her experience, right? To capture the shock of what it is to be someone who has a friend, lover, whatever, commit suicide. It's of course it's always shocking, but to the audience it seems like, at least for me, it felt like it kind of came out of left field.
Yeah.
And it just it didn't feel like the movie was done telling a story. Like, my experience watching it was just waiting for the plot to happen. And it's, that's a difficult thing because it's based on memoirs. It's based on this like kind of unfinished dynamic between the two of them, and it just, I don't know. Maybe it's just not the thing that should have been adapted. Like, chapters of it should have been adapted in like a more wide sweeping thing in my mind. I don't know.
Yeah, the thing about his suicide, I feel like that's such an important thing that the movie's always building towards, that it never really feels like you said, there's any payoff to it. I don't know a ton about Novelin, I don't know a ton about Conan, but I read a bunch about Robert E. Howard earlier this year because I wrote about Helen of Windhorn, which is the Tom King comic based on the death of Robert E. Howard. And basically the premise is exactly the same, where it's like there's a pulp writer in the mid-1930s who's mildly successful, and then out of nowhere he kills himself, and it's just examining like, what does that do to people that are left to grapple with it when there's really no good answer. And that was kind of the scene when Robert E. Howard died. After he died, there were people in Weird Tales who like wrote tributes about him, and there's a really good poem about him that was published in the issue right after. But essentially what happened was his mother had tuberculosis, and she'd been grappling with it for years. And at one point she was in the hospital and the doctor essentially told him, look, she's not going to regain consciousness at this point. And that's when he went to his car and he pulled out the gun and he killed himself. And then that weekend she died as well, and they had a double funeral for both of them. And the thing about it was, you would assume that his mother and him were really, really close, but there's a lot of conflicting stories about whether or not that's true. And so when he died, there was a lot of mystery in the air of like, okay, was this just grief because his mom died, which seems natural? And then other people saying, well, no, it wasn't that. It was the fact that he was not making a ton of money anymore, and that Weird Tales was behind on payments, and he was really stressed out about his life, and this was just like the straw that broke the camel's back. And then other people are saying that like they actually had like a weird toxic relationship, and he didn't know what to do without her at that point, even though he didn't really love her. And then other people saying, no, that's crazy. It was, he loved her and devoted his entire life to her. And like, there's a lot of conflict there. There's not just one perspective. And that's what made it so enticing. And Novelin's only got like one window into that. So when he kills himself, that scene is really strange because she gets like the telegram or the call or whatever. And then she goes to the desk to try and write a letter, and then she can't. And then you hover over the letter and you realize that he killed himself. And it almost, to me, feels like that scene is kind of backwards, where you should, I think, understand that he killed himself and then let that be the driving drama of her grappling with it and trying to find a reason for it going forward, right? Like, as a character, you would want her to have that information and then either glean nothing from it because there's nothing to glean, or come to some conclusion from it. And then the movie just never does any of that. Like, he dies because the movie has to end, but it doesn't feel like it's motivated by anything.
That's kind of where I'm at with it. It's just a lot of this, this makes sense as an adaptation of a memoir, but it just doesn't make sense as like a movie in and of itself. I feel like I watched the 2-hour deleted scenes from a larger Robert E. Howard biopic.
Yeah.
I just don't know if this is the thing that should have been adapted. If you wanted to tell a more complete story, because it just feels like it just doesn't feel very filmic, I guess, is kind of what I'm getting at. Is it just feels like a window into his life, but not enough of a window that it like really warranted a whole movie. I think it makes sense as her memoirs to record it. I think that's very significant to her and to people who are already curious about Robert E. Howard. But again, I think you need a wider picture of Robert E. Howard to like understand why like her insights are so significant to him.
Right.
Which I, just as someone who doesn't know anything about Robert E. Howard besides he worked with Lovecraft, it just felt like very, very incomplete of a film.
I mean, that's
The other
thing
thing-
that was.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Matt.
I mean, that's the thing that was frustrating me about it, because I get that it's like, well, if you're going to tell a more complete story of Robert E. Howard, you kind of have to make some choices. You're talking about someone from the 30s who people speculate about whether or not they were clinically, had depression or this, that, and the other. And it's like, if you're going to commit to doing this in-depth character study, you're going to have to make some of those decisions, and that can be a little tricky to do. So it makes sense to, let's look at it from Novelin's point of view. But you get exactly that problem, where the interesting things about Robert E. Howard, which are the way that his life affected his writing, is a fucking footnote in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's... Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and that's not to discount, I think, her perspective on his life, because she was, as far as we know, the only person he had any sort of serious relationship with. And
Yeah.
even though they broke up and they never rekindled, as far as we know, they were still in kind of constant communication. They were always back and forth with each other. They were always writing letters to each other. So if you were gonna focus on her perspective, it seems like she also has a very complex view of the guy that she didn't really have the chance in life to really reconcile before he died. But the movie's not really interested in any of that, because it spins so much of it as just sort of a cliche romance. And there's a lot of will they, won't they. But Novelin as a character feels like she doesn't really have her own journey. She's just kind of passively moving through the world, and as stuff happens to Robert E. Howard, she learns about it, but then stuff just sort of passively happens to her to push her on the other end of the spectrum for Howard to come back to get her or move away from her or etc. Like, it doesn't feel like it's a story that's really dramatically driven to give her any sort of agency or to give her any sort of like chance to interrogate her relationship with him. And maybe that is just the memoir. Maybe she just was not a critical person and she just didn't observe those tensions in his life. But it seems like if you're going to make a movie and you're going to focus it on the girlfriend of an extremely famous pulp writer, you might want to focus a little bit more on just why did she constantly decide to get back with him? What were her feelings about that relationship? What are like the tensions from her side of it, which the movie never really seems interested in?
I mean, you do definitely see there is a level of attraction there that I think is sold pretty well by D'Onofrio's just sheer fucking charisma in this role, because I feel like that's worth talking about. You had mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I saw your kind of thing that you had. I don't know if that was on Letterboxd. I don't know what Letterboxd looks like. I'm not on that fucking site, but I saw your little rundown of it, and I was like, yeah, that scene where he's talking about Conan is great. It's so fucking good.
It's so good.
It's amazing, and it's so, it feels like so earnest and kind of over the top in a way that's like a little like, are you okay, dude? And it's
it's a little scary. I love it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's like exactly the note you want to kind of hit. And so I think D'Onofrio, and to an extent Renee Zellweger, I do think they sell a lot of it. I think D'Onofrio gets a lot more to work with, and I think Zellweger is held back by exactly what you're saying, that Novelin feels very passive in this.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing I like about it, because I do like the movie at the end of the day. I enjoyed watching it. I thought it was solid. But the thing that's like carrying it over the hump for me is D'Onofrio is amazing, and Zellweger and D'Onofrio have a legitimate chemistry with each other that's exciting to watch, even if they're not really saying anything. I love the one scene where she's teaching at the school, and then her and her coworker are looking over the porch, and he's just like shadow boxing in broad daylight.
Yeah,
and like, it seems so strange to them, but then the camera moves over and looks him dead on, and he's just into it. He is going at it. He's so focused. And that dissonance of like this really weird, quiet, strange, normal life, and this fucking insane person just shadow boxing. That's the kind of stuff I really like about it, where I think where it oversimplifies him as a person, but I think when it makes him otherworldly and weird, it really works.
Yeah. I would agree with that to an extent, but again, it's just, you're so far removed from whatever the fuck is going on in his life that you just get to that scene with him in the fucking sombrero. And it just comes off as like that one weird kid from school that like just decided he was gonna wear his fucking like anime character Halloween costume every day. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't know, man. Someone over a line here, and I feel like every nerd has had that moment where they kind of like step back and go, "Oh wait, I might be crossing a line," but then there's just the people that don't even think about it, and it just, I don't know, it just had that whole like uncomfortable energy to it, and like it works within the context of the scene, but it just, I don't know, it just makes him so far removed in a way that like it almost became like comical to look at instead of what I feel the film was trying to communicate, given that's one of the like, not final scenes, but one of the last times that they talk before he kills himself. So just makes for like a weird moment. And again, maybe that's directly lifted from her memoirs, that he just showed up wearing a fucking sombrero one day and she didn't want to have anything to do with him in that moment. But I just don't know. It's a choice.
I mean, that's really what we're kind of talking about, right? Because I mean, a lot of these stories and even exchanges could be pulled straight from that memoir because it's inherently just going to be her side of the story. So we don't know what he was doing in that hat at that store because she doesn't fucking know.
And I mean, to your point though, I do kind of enjoy being in this weird sort of middle ground with Howard outside looking in, where like I don't know to be terrified of him or if I should laugh at him. You know, I think that sort of dissonance is interesting, and it's interesting only because I think D'Onofrio is doing such a good job, not because I think the movie's super aware of it. Matt, like you said earlier, that scene where he's describing Conan the Barbarian, what he means to him, and you're just like pushing in slowly, and he's just going more and more and more top like he's a crazy person. It's a little scary, but it's also just fucking hilarious that anyone would do this. And that's kind of what I like about it is it's playing on that line between like how seriously does this guy take this stuff versus how much of it is just this charming persona that enticed her into a relationship. It's never saying more about that. Like it's never using that to like arrive at a conclusion, at least not a generous one. But those moment to moment interactions I think are enjoyable for that reason. One of the things about the way he talks about his characters that I feel like the movie could have done more with is just how much of them are vehicles for him to kind of escape his own life. Because you get all these scenes where he's writing or you hear him write and he's just narrating out loud and the music is booming and it's scary and it's weird and it's all so like out of place with her just like walking around his house or him hanging out with his mother. It's so tonally strange. And it's almost like he's entered a trance at that point. Like he comes off of writing and he's like sweating bullets. And I like that.
Yeah, I like
think
the
that's
bit where his
interesting.
mom has to like yell his name like 5 times to get him to come away from the typewriter.
Yeah.
Right, and I like that, and it's cool. But it also sort of feels like, okay, and what is this arriving at?
Right. Which with
I
a
don't know,
more
it's-
complete picture of him, you could get that. You could also get that by talking more about the time in which he lived and the his views on, like I said, kind of the Texas oil boom, his views on kind of having a foot in both rural and urban communities, and kind of how the expectations and norms of that time period contrasted with what he kind of saw in the visions of the world he was writing. I feel like there's so much to delve into about Robert E. Howard that is interesting, and I keep circling back to this idea that this movie is focused on none of it and is focused on arguably the least interesting facet of his life, which is his relationship with Novelin, which could be interesting if we tied it more into this broader look at him, but we don't. So I'm just left with a movie that I don't understand what the point of what I just watched was.
Yeah. You know, one thing that like kind of goes off on that, because you were talking about the context to which around which he lived, is I feel like for this movie kind of just being about conversations that Novelin had with Robert E. Howard, I feel like some of those conversations are just missing, and they're probably the more important ones. Because like there's times where they're just arguing about like his life view of like such a negative world, such like negative opinions about the world. But like I know a pretty good deal about the world of the 30s at this point. But I don't feel like the movie does. Because they just don't talk about like anything that's going on in the world by which to compare any of it to. They're just kind of, I guess, assuming that you'll know that, which I don't think most like people do. And even then, my knowledge of the 30s isn't about America in the 30s, by and large. But like, there's stuff to talk about there, like with what the Dust Bowl and all that shit. So you got like, you know, the coming back from the Depression. You've got like FDR would be president by this point. There's a lot of stuff going on that's like worth talking about, and I think like FDR might be a good kind of person for them to have focused on, given that like he was, pitching himself as like the ally of the working man and the working class and yada yada, and trying to offer like that hand up thing, where as that like with all the pessimism that they're attributing to Robert E. Howard here, and the way that he like appears to be like looking down on people and such, that might be like an interesting thing to contrast and discuss the politics of the day. But they're just not doing.
Well, because there's a theme in Robert E. Howard's writing, especially in his Conan stuff, this idea that like he leans into that sort of it can border on that kind of problematic noble savage type archetype, but that's kind of how he felt, that like, you've got all these people in these big cities, and yet they are constantly backstabbing each other and turning on each other, and it's really the more simple person who lives a life outside of all of this who is the more noble and chivalrous and kind of better person. And it's like that is such a common theme in his writing that one would think that any story that focuses on his life would explore where those views come from. But instead, we just get occasional lip service about how he sees like hypocrisy. They talk a little bit about it when they're talking about like him writing erotic short stories, which he did write a few of. And he talks a little bit about that, about him just being honest with what people are wanting to see and wanting to read and wanting to hear, and people don't seem to want to be honest about those things. And it's like that's where you get the little nuggets of it, where I think there could have been broader, more interesting discussions about that specifically.
And I just don't think that, what was the name of this director again? I can't remember. But I just don't think there's like a deft enough hand at directing this to make any of those interesting nuggets come out. It feels, the worst thing about the movie to me at the end of the day is it almost just feels like a Lifetime movie, where,
Oof.
and I don't mean that as a bad thing necessarily, because I like Lifetime movies. I watch Hallmark movies.
Hold on. I gotta interject here. I'm sorry, because what happened is I watched this on Prime, and I was just kind of letting the credits play out while I was just looking at my phone, because I was kind of checked out by the end of it. But I was watching on Prime, the credits played out, and then Prime started to autoplay something else, and it was the Lifetime movie on J.K. Rowling. So, like, your point is so on there.
No.
That it's literally the algorithm agrees.
You look at the movie, right, and it's not very pretty. It's very flat. It feels like you said earlier, like they're not really on the... Forget Texas. It doesn't really feel like they're on location a lot of the time. All of the dialogue is like very over in your face. They're saying the themes out loud as opposed to having natural conversations. But the biggest thing for me is like it's got this problem that a lot of melodramatic movies have, where the score is the thing that's telling you how to feel before the scene has a chance to convince you of how you're supposed to feel. So like big sad swings to start a scene, or big triumphant booms to start a scene. All of these like little devices where the director or the editor or whoever's making the choice clearly doesn't trust the audience to understand the emotion from just the context of the actors, characters, and the set. So the music has to do that job for you. And when you do that consistently, like Ian said, you get kind of checked out, because it feels like the movie's holding your hand so much that your brain almost turns off a little bit and you're not paying as much attention, because there's just less to pay attention to. It's like you're getting everything you need to hear without working for it. So when people are talking and walking and moving through, you just kind of glaze over it. That's what makes things like Hallmark movies and Lifetime movies like so addicting for some people, is that they're so perfectly passive. They're like the Netflix movie to have on in the background while you're scrolling before that was a thing. And this movie definitely has that a little bit, where it's not as egregious as a lot of Lifetime or Hallmark movies that I've seen, but it's definitely not very confident in what it's saying. So it's using a lot of shortcuts. And that's maybe what makes it so hard to like really remember what's going on by the end. Because I can remember the scenes I liked, and I remember after it was over being like, yeah, that was solid. But now, like a couple days later, we're talking about it, and I'm like, I remember 3 things. I remember exactly 3 things about this movie, and I'll probably never watch it again.
Yeah, I know
Yeah.
you were talking to me. You were telling me about how it's got that like lifetime style of everyone just kind of saying all the quiet parts out loud. You know what fucking pissed me off? The last scene of this movie pissed me off so much when she's at the bus station and we've got this random old lady there to tell us what the themes are and how she should feel. And I'm like, if we had just had her look off, see Robert E. Howard walking away, and just rely on Renee Zellweger's ability to act through that sequence, and then while she's on the bus, just see the sunrise, and have that pretty much have the same facial expressions that she does. If we had just removed this random old woman, that ending would have felt a lot nicer. But it's so, I don't give a shit if Novelin told you that this exact exchange happened, that some wise old woman came up to her and shared these words with her. I don't give a fuck. Cut it out. Like that pissed me. That
100%.
actually annoyed the shit out of me.
No, 100%. It's a movie that doesn't trust you to let your brain do the work on any of those moments at all. And so it's always just telegraphing these things, either through the dialogue or through the music, or just like through really cliche arguments and exchanges that all feel the same at a certain point. The will they, won't they of Robert E. Howard and Novlin, it gets kind of exhausting after a certain point. And like after the first breakup, I'm not even entirely sure why they keep getting back together.
That's a good point. Because
that's the other thing is like
his charisma as an actor is only taking it so far. I need to see what she actually sees in him beyond. Like after a weirdo.
Right, like after the first breakup, after she realizes what she got into, I just never understand what's bringing her back.
Because he's not changing. If anything, he's getting worse.
Right, exactly.
And yet she keeps like agreeing to go on dates with him, and like I guess she's like hoping that he'll be different, but he's just not changing at all. And she seems to have like better prospects with this other friend of theirs. So it's just, again, it's just such a weird thing to, maybe that's what actually happened. But here's the thing. With these adaptations of people's memoirs or of historical events in general, whenever we do a period piece film, what actually happened, it is important to show to a degree, but it is also important to balance that with the fact that you are making a movie and there's supposed to be a narrative. Mm-hmm. So like if you're going to show these moments of like, well, then I went on with them again, then you need to show us, the viewers, not just, well, this happened, so it's okay to put it on screen. You need to show us why you're deciding to put it on screen.
Well, and to that point, right, like this is almost the opposite, Matt, of what you said at the end, where there probably wasn't some person in her life who talked to her and was like, hey, you need to explain to me why you keep doing this because it's weird. But for the sake of the movie, there probably should have been. There probably should have been some secondary character that she has more than 3 lines of dialogue with to like externalize some of this.
Oh, for sure. For sure. There's a balancing act between like, you never want the character who just explains how you should be feeling and explains the themes of the movie to you. But like at the same time, if you have characters in your movie making decisions that are seemingly based upon nothing, that is also a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need a lot, right? Like, Renee Zellweger is good. I think she does a good job looking conflicted, but like, with Robert E. Howard, right? Like, we're not privy to his life. We're watching him secondhandedly, essentially. But he's got such a huge supporting cast of people that help externalize what he's about. You've got his mom, you've got his dad, you've got his friend that sets them up. Like, there's enough people there that you can get like a full scope of him without him ever being the main character. But there's no one in Novelin's life at all that serves that purpose for her. Like, she's got the group of friends that first show up right before they go on the date, and then she's got that one teacher friend she talks to a couple of times, and then the random old lady at the end. But like, she has no supporting cast. She has no friends. She has no family. She has basically no one in the movie to like talk through her character arc or her motivations at all. And it feels like that's really necessary if she's your main character and Robert isn't.
Dude, all you needed to do was set up some sort of contrast between the way she feels treated by Robert and the way that maybe she would have felt treated by like the average dude in the 1930s. Because you think about this idea of Robert and her, their relationship consists of them just genuinely talking to each other and having a back and forth dialogue. And you could compare that to her trying to go, trying to be in a relationship or talk to anyone else at that time, and see that maybe she just feels that she's maybe there's less direct conflict, but there's no dialogue. Maybe she doesn't feel quite as engaged intellectually or respected, because the thing is, Robert E. Howard, by most accounts, I'm not going to go so far as to say he was some ultra feminist, because he wasn't, but like, he respected the ability of women. He respected that women could accomplish great things. And I feel like there's so much there that would probably make a lot of sense for why she would come back to him, in terms of just the way that he would treat her compared to the way she may feel treated by broader 1930s society and what they kind of expect of women. And that's where I just feel like this needed more grounding in its setting, and it needed more grounding within the broader sphere of Robert E. Howard's life, because then all those things could have clicked into place in a very natural way. They just kind of don't, though, because it's so narrow in what it's doing.
Especially too, because her big like window into his life early on is she wants to be a writer too, and she's career oriented in that way. But that's never really, like you said, as part of the setting, that's never really a conflict or a challenge she has to overcome. There's never really any moment in the movie where it's like, I want to be a writer, but the man says no, right? Like, what is that accomplishing, really?
You know what's really great about that point, Steve? Is he has, in this movie, he has that whole ass argument with her about how what she's doing isn't writing, she's just copying down people's conversations. That's boring, that's literally just copying. And then what is this movie? It's kind of boring, she's just copied down all their conversations.
Great point, actually.
Oh no.
Damn! That might have dropped it a whole star!
Oh, fuck.
Damn!
Like...
You're right, though. Jesus,
you know what?
I never thought of that.
You know what? I know that Robert E. Howard is a better writer than Novelin Price, and it's been long enough. I can make the joke. He's got a really well-written suicide note.
Oh.
Like that, those 4 lines are pretty. Those are pretty fire. Like, I mean, it's good shit.
Not a part of his suicide note, but after he died, R.H. Barlow, who was also a writer at Weird Tales and knew H.P. Lovecraft and all that, he published a poem about Robert E. Howard that was just called R.E.H. And that poem is honestly fucking incredible. If you haven't read it, I would encourage you to go look it up, or you could go check out my review of Helen of Windhorn on Comic Speed, which opens with that poem.
I'm gonna fucking read the comic. Just give me some. I don't have time right now. I'm gonna read it.
It's a good. I really need to see what Matt does when he's watching like a YouTube video and they go to their sponsored segment, because that felt like so targeted.
I don't mean to brag or anything, but I think it's one of my favorite things I've written about too.
Steve
it's a good review. It's a good review.
Steve has been telling me about Helen of Windhorn for fucking forever, and I'm just like, I will get around to it. It's on the pile, but I keep finding new things to add to the pile, and they're higher on my priority list.
I mean, as long as you've got like actual books on that pile, I will forgive not reading a.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Damn. Elitism comes out. Hot damn.
Um,
No, that's cool. He read a book about heavy metal and punk, and what was it, punk or was it something else?
Death metal and grindcore.
There we go, grindcore. That's what it was.
oh, that's the book you got for your birthday, right?
I did. Yeah, I read that. It was good.
I need to check that out.
It talks a lot about the history of those subgenres. Unlike this movie, which does not talk about the history of Robert E. Howard very well.
Good
I'm just
segue.
trying to bring this around somehow.
Good segue.
I did enjoy when he was like the handful of times they talk about his stories, and I had my little fucking Avengers moment where I was like, oh, I know what story. I recognize what he's talking about. I understood that reference. I've read those. Because he talks about 3 different very specific Conan stories, and each time I'm just like, I understood that reference.
Yeah, what's the one with the orgy like setting?
Oh, that is Red Nails, which is where Valyria comes from, and it is, I would say it's probably the most famous. It's up there. But yeah, that's Red Nails.
That is something I meant to ask you, because I just haven't read a lot of Conan, so I didn't recognize the references to the stories. But after watching it, I did want to ask you, do you feel like the movie gave enough thought to picking what stories they were going to reference, or did you feel like they were just random? Like, was there any thematic bearing to them, or no?
I think they picked 3 of the most popular.
Okay, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. I just wanted to hope I was.
Well, because they do. The Devil in Iron is the only one that they like name drop specifically. Like that's
Right.
the only one where we see the iconic cover, and I'm pretty sure that's why they picked it, because it's got that iconic, Weird Tales cover. Because it's mostly just about like Conan saving a slave girl. Like it really has nothing to do with anything. Where I think you could have expanded more is he talks briefly about the Queen of the Black Coast, where Conan has a relationship with his first like true love, Belit. And then you have Red Nails, which also introduces Valyria, who is the other like really well-known, strong female Conan character along with Belit. And so I'm just like, so we are picking stories that feature women, and 2 of them feature very strong women by the standards of that time, and one of them is even a romance. So like there's something here, but I feel like it doesn't really go any further than that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just like we're picking these because of these surface things and because they are like 3 of the most famous ones. And
Right.
I feel like there's nothing deeper to it, and that frustrated me because I'm like, I feel like you could have done something like that where we're seeing what stories is he writing at what point in his life, and what is going on in his life that is leading to the inspiration of those stories, and that just doesn't happen. And we don't even touch on the stuff he's writing that is outside of Conan, because the dude just could not stop writing things. We only talk about like the novel he wants to write, and then when he's doing the erotic stuff.
Yeah. So did that novel ever end up happening, or nah?
I mean, he wrote. I think he wrote 2 novels in his life. One was a Conan novel. The other was not Conan, so I don't know it very well. It might have. It fucking might have. I don't know.
Well, there's just that whole scene where they kiss, where he's talking about like being on the prairie and stuff, and he wants to talk about like the prairie girl or the Indian, yada yada yada.
Yeah.
And so I was just like curious if that actually came to fruition or not. Because again, I just don't know much about this man's career outside he worked with H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Which not a high bar for me personally, because I don't like Lovecraft very much anymore.
Well, that's what's funny about it is that they bring up Lovecraft again, like he's like it's a reference in an Avengers movie. They're just like Lovecraft, but like, what about that? Like, okay, so he knows Lovecraft. How did that affect him? Like, why? I don't know, but he knew him and they were friends, and it's like, okay.
Well, especially because it seems like Novelin's more excited about Lovecraft than he is. Like, she brings him up in conversation the second time and opens up the letter, but like we never really get her perspective on any of that, or like why he's less enthusiastic, or like if her whole dream and ambition is to be a writer, what's stopping her from taking Lovecraft's address off of that envelope and trying to talk to him instead of Robert E. Howard? Like, none of that stuff really feels like it plays into the actual drama of the movie.
The idea of H.P. Lovecraft mentoring a woman is so funny to me.
Well, especially because it could go wrong, right? Like Matt said, like if you want to contrast the treatment of her by other people of the era, it seems like a no-brainer to just be like, has she tried to publish before? Has she tried to ask for help before from other people, and it just doesn't work? And that's why she's so enticed by Robert.
Did people not even give her the respect of properly critiquing her work? Like something, anything.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like some layer of like, she clearly wants to write. She clearly seems well read. The idea that you're name dropping Lovecraft, it doesn't have to be an Avenger style reference. It could be thematically relevant, and it just never really is.
I don't know. I'm sorry, Matt. I didn't care for this movie very much, and I don't want you to take it personally.
I mean, okay. See, like that's my thing with it, right? I love Conan, but I've never cared that much about what goes on with Robert E. Howard's life because, like, 1930s America has just never been a period and location that I've been super fascinated by. So, like, I've always known that this movie existed. I've known it existed for a while, and I just needed an excuse to make myself watch it, and then I watched it and I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like I'm just like, I don't know what I expected. Like,
Yeah. Again, I feel bad because I feel like this has been just a really negative review, and I set the tone for that. But I tried to like put caveats in the beginning because the performances are really good. The way it's shot, it's not great or anything, but like it's not atrocious. There's some pretty shots, like when they make a big deal out of like the sunset and the moon and stuff, and the sunrises as well, and so they do a good job shooting that. Like it's like pretty nature documentary kind of looking shots. Some good stock footage level shooting and coverage. I laughed at the scene where she's storming off, trying to walk through the field because she doesn't want to get back in the car with him, and he just drives after her. That was pretty funny. That was like well acted and well shot. Like there's things that are done well. Like you guys talked about the scene where he's talking about Conan. Steve mentioned the scene where he's shadow boxing down the street. Both of those are great scenes in and of themselves. One we haven't talked about that I quite liked. I like the moment where he just fucking loses his mind for half a minute because the car won't start, and he just starts like macheting his way through his fucking yard.
That was really good. Yeah.
I also love like they play the like sword sound effects and stuff like that, and there's a sequence where he's takes her to this big like scenic overlook, and they play this kind of tribally, more, I guess, medieval fantasy-esque music. And I'm like, I like these little moments where we see kind of the world that Robert E. Howard sees behind everything. I think that's really fun. There's also a really great moment where he and Novelin are talking. I think they're in a school, and like one of Novelin's coworkers shows up, and he just starts like talking at her and backing her into the hallway, and then just closes the door. And it's so good. Yeah, there's a lot of individual moments in this that are super good.
Yeah, I mean it's a romantic drama from the 90s, right? Like it's a very stock formula. It takes very little to get past the bar of quality for those, and it certainly meets that.
I also appreciate that we got the backstory for like the one picture of Robert E. Howard that exists.
That was cute. I liked that.
It's like, I mean, there are others, but like that is that's the one. That's the famous Robert E. Howard photo, and they're like, we gotta get the origin of the photo in this movie.
I think that's kind of what made me want to root for this movie, is like when he first asks her on the date and he's not dressed well, and then the second time he makes the effort to dress really well, and she's really taken by it. There's something just so infectious about that attempt to try that it like engenders a lot of goodwill from me going forward. So like by the end, like after the end of this conversation, maybe it's not as good as I remember, but I remember as I was watching it, I felt pretty happy or pretty okay with it as I was going through, just because I thought the things about that relationship when it worked was so magnetic that it overshadowed all the parts of the movie that are just bad or not good.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Yeah, this might be one of those cases where like the movie's better if you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Like when you start to try to unpack it, it kind of falls apart a little bit, but like you wouldn't think that just having watched it. And I don't know if that's like a mark against it or not. It's just sometimes that happens with a movie where like, you know, it's fine when you're watching it and you don't like really have any problems with it, so to speak. But then like you start to unpack your feelings on it and suddenly all you can pull out is negatives. We had like the opposite of this the other week where God, what were we talking about? Where we were like, man, it was the Nicolas Cage movie with the ambulance.
Oh yeah,
like, like this is a good movie. And then we're like sitting there talking about it so long. We're like, can we think of like anything actually, you know, that didn't work about the movie or that like wasn't great? No, it's just a really, really good movie.
Yeah.
And then, you know, like it's hard to unpack anything bad. And this one, we're having like the exact opposite problem. Like, you know, watching it, I was not offended or like overly annoyed or anything. It wasn't necessarily like firing on all cylinders for me, but I was enjoying it well enough. But it like upon unpacking it, I'm just like, man, maybe this is kind of a bad movie.
It's like the perfect sort of Sunday afternoon popcorn movie, right? Like it's the movie that you turn on TNT while you're folding laundry on Sunday afternoon or something.
Man, how long you fold laundry for? This is a 2-hour movie, Steve.
A lot of laundry.
That's like I'm folding laundry.
Focus on your fucking laundry. Turn off the movie.
Socks, okay? I go through a lot of socks. It takes me 2 hours to fold my socks.
Jesus Christ.
Uh,
Steve fucking replacing socks every 3 hours of his day. Just...
have you ever tried to fold a fitted sheet on your own? It's really hard. Yeah, I can't say that I didn't enjoy watching the movie, but you're definitely right. There is just a lot about it that doesn't work. I didn't know this movie existed. I guess I'll give it that. Because I'd read a decent amount of Robert E. Howard when I was going to write about him, but this movie never came up until Matt mentioned it. So
Dude, no one knows this movie exists. I don't
Right, which
understand
seems
why
weird.
that is. Because like the director Dan Ireland, his discography, Jesus Christ, I really was reading too much about music. His filmography is like it's nothing that I have ever fucking heard of. And it took me, and I've known this movie has existed for a while, but like I was getting into Conan for many years before I knew this movie existed. So like no one talks about it, and I think part of the reason no one talks about it, like it's not that it's shit, because it's not, but it doesn't.
It's just
really
not very good.
It's not very good, and it's not really about him as a writer. It's about this romance, and I feel like a movie that was about him as a writer probably would make more of a splash and more people would maybe talk about it, but that's assuming that it would be good, because it might have also been bad. But yeah, it's weird that no one knows that this exists, especially when Vincent D'Onofrio is so popular now.
Well, and
yeah, that's kind of the crazy part of like how old this movie is. What, 96 versus like D'Onofrio's career being just so like the dude's been around forever, but he's also like hardly been in anything until Punisher. It would seem.
Or you mean Daredevil?
Or yeah, Daredevil. It would seem, but you know, here we are. I don't know. It's a weird time.
Well, and
like after Daredevil, he was in fucking everything for a hot minute. He's just got like, he's one of those actors who doesn't look incredibly recognizable role to role. So I think that's part of it.
He's kind of a classic character actor after that kind of concept fell out of favor, right? Like, we used to have so many good classic character actors from like the 60s onward, but like end of the 90s to the 2000s, that's just not a thing that happens as much, or there isn't as many people that can make a career out of it, because he does this, but then he immediately after this does Men in Black, and he's great in Men in Black, but you would never think that that's Vincent D'Onofrio watching that movie.
You said it, and I was like, "Who the fuck is he in Men in Black?" And it took me a minute to remember.
Right,
like that's just so crazy.
Right, and he's in that movie. He's not a bit part. He's like he's the main antagonist. But it's just one of those things you don't remember. But speaking to the fact that no one remembers it too, I mean, I think the other big part of it, outside of just not having a star-studded cast, with the exception of Zellweger, I guess, is that Dan Ireland's just not a very good stylist, right? Like, there's nothing about this movie that doesn't just scream work for hire director. And I'm looking through his filmography now that you mention it, and like, I've never heard of any of these movies. I don't know what the fuck the velocity of Gary is, and I'm not going to find out.
Next week on Geeky Gentlemen, the velocity of Gary. just pick like the most like fucking nobody director and do their entire filmography as a series on Geeky Gentlemen.
Well, luckily you don't have to worry about making him feel bad about it, because he is no longer with us, sadly.
Aww.
Oh, that's too bad. Sorry, now I feel bad for making fun of him. Maybe if I didn't make fun of him, he'd still be alive. Damn it!
I'm sorry. Didn't I just say that Robert E. Howard's Suicide Note was really, really well written?
This is fair. Well, I mean, it's been like almost 100 years relative to him, which I imagine has been what? Last 20? Last 10?
Yeah.
It's probably something to that.
Alright, well, I think we're done. I think this is the end of this one.
I think that's it. I don't think we have anything more to say.
We call it making fun of dead people.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's just the end of the episode. I think we're good. Let's go ahead and go on to ratings. I'll go first. This might be kind of harsh, but I like the positives here. I don't think are enough to generate the 2-hour watch. The fact that I like actively don't think I would ever watch this again. If I was flipping through channels on TV, that thing I do all the time, because that's still how people watch television, I would definitely not stop to watch this. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a 1 out of 5.
Oof.
Swords slashing through the yard.
Oh dang.
I'm actually a little surprised by that rating, but yeah, talking about it, unpacking it more, I think this movie's actually not.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna give it a 2.5. Sombreros out of 5. I don't know. Go read a Conan short story instead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in a similar boat. I'll also give it 2.5 out of 5 machetes through a cornfield.
Yeah, that was mine. Gotta pick a different one.
That's true.
2.5 out of 5 really bad movie dates.
Oh, yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
All right.
Unfortunate.
Everyone, thank you so much for watching. We'll be back next month to start holiday month. A bunch of Christmas movie reviews, and we'll try to think of a topic for Christmas again. And so until then, I'm the philosopher.
I'm the Robert E. Howard erotica lover.
How is his erotica, Matt?
So I've only read one of his erotic short stories, and I shit you not, it was for research for a Conan tabletop RPG campaign.
Damn. Extra nerdy.
It's not good, but
Yeah, I kind of figured. Dang.
Steve, sign out.
And I am happy that this movie is over.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing.
I